The biggest thing that my therapy has given me as a gift was really just validating the struggles that I faced to begin with. My therapist really had an eye for understanding how can we take whatever your story is and not rewrite the content, but almost put a different filter on it. And honestly, it took me a while to even start the process, to think that there could be another way to look at my story.
Hi, friends. Welcome to Stories from 100 Days to Brave, a podcast where we hear real stories of friends who took the brave first steps to become who they truly are. I'm your host, Annie F. Downs. Man, we've gotten to hear so many great stories in this podcast. And if you've gotten a chance to hear the other 9 episodes, I hope you've gotten something out of every one of them as you are making your own journey to brave. And if this is your first time listening to the series, we hope you'll check all the other stories out. I think you'll be glad you did. So as we bring this series to a close, I'm excited for you to get to know Tawni Jacobson. Tawni is a mental health therapist and was inspired to get into this field after she herself benefited so much from therapy. Me too. As you know, I'm a huge advocate for taking care of your mental and emotional selves as well as your physical and spiritual. And a great therapist can guide us through that process. For Tawni, it was where she learned that she could reframe her story of heartache and disappointment and time lost into a beautiful picture of redemption. Her story is so spot on for how brave manifests itself in our lives in all different ways, and how getting a little help along the way can be the biggest step we can take.
Hi there, my name is Tawni Jacobson. I'm a mental health therapist in Utah Valley. So I was 9 years old when I was diagnosed with Tourette syndrome. And so it's kind of a big diagnosis. There's the social implications that go with it, but also it kind of comes with what they call comorbid existing kind of conditions. And one of those is depression. So that was already kind of wired into my brain chemistry ahead of time. That would be one of the major struggles that I had growing up. But alongside of that, just kind of a high stress environment in my home, some traumatic events that happened in childhood that I didn't get a chance to really process real time or even until I was an adult. And again, with Tourette's, with the depression, with even trauma, some of these things that I'm learning now is that trauma affects the body. And so I actually had some health conditions growing up that eventually caused me to have to drop out of high school when I was 16. So some of my physical problems began directly related to taking medication for Tourette syndrome. Now, I am in no means against medication at all. In fact, as a therapist, I often will suggest, depending on the personal experiences of certain clients, medication is a gift and a blessing. For me, it did not turn out that way. And so a lot of my health issues started as side effects of these multiple medications that were given to me to kind of calm the Tourette symptoms, but instead they kind of exacerbated other health issues. So that I think was the major hurdle in my life where I could say, oh, that's it, the gavel has been dropped and I will not amount to anything. One of the main kind of thing that kind of was exacerbated was my breathing started to be messed up because I ended up gaining about 85 pounds in 8 months in high school. It was right before I ended up dropping out. So it was right as like the pinnacle of my health problems were starting. I gained all this weight, and it was directly because of the medication I was taking, multiple medications. But at that point, it was more or less becoming toxic. And so once I started to, go through therapy and started to even just wean off of those medications with the doctor's help, it began to kind of self-correct those things. I had more endurance. I had more hope, to be honest, where I was like, oh, okay, I could actually walk from my room to the end of the block. Well, maybe I'll walk a little bit further, and I started to move a little bit, which in turn, you exercise, you get endorphins, your depression gets a little, so it really was a domino effect, but it took probably about 10 years to really get momentum on my health. So basically, there was this big monster unknown to me of, sadness and sickness and embarrassment and shame, and everything kind of rolled up into I can't get past it, right? And so, really, what therapy did was it named it. It said, "Oh, that's trauma." Oh, okay. Or, "Oh, that's depression. That's actually clinically appropriate for your diagnosis." Oh, okay. So that's something that, I kind of got to see that I didn't have to convince anyone that my struggles were real anymore, because they were. They had a name. This was something that I wasn't the only one that had struggled with it. But also, I wouldn't be the only one that would overcome it. It really freed me up to kind of look up and see the pain that other people's stories were enduring. Bitterness has been kind of the last frontier of my healing, I think. I think it's easy to say, okay, I have the power inside myself to heal, or I can, tap into what God is doing in my life and move towards healing and victory. But those things that happen to me, those are harder to come to grips with. I almost would rather my story be one of overt failure, disappointment completely on my end, full responsibility, and then waking up and being like, I'm guilty and I need help. But I think the thing that was hard for me is when there's something that's completely out of your control. One, I was a child, but two, I wasn't a doctor, and neither were my parents. They were doing what was best for what they thought was best. What these doctors are prescribing, and so yeah, bitterness became kind of that last toxin. Once all the medication was out and once my body started to heal, there was that pit of bitterness in there, and I do still struggle with it. That the therapy started to, I think what it did was say, it's okay that you're bitter. Now let's work on being less bitter. It wasn't this like, you're not irrational for being angry at this happening to you. That's not irrational, but it's not helping you. I love Brene Brown. She writes this book called Rising Strong. She says that, she was struggling with bitterness as well. And she realized, someone said, "Do you think that those people are doing the best that they can?" And she's like, "No, I don't. I think most people are failing, and most people are failing me." And there was this just bitterness growing inside of her. And, finally she asked her husband, he says, "I don't know. I don't know if people are doing the best they can, but I know that my life is easier when I believe they are." And I've really been trying to live into that. And again, it's a new concept for me. It's brand new. I mean, maybe in the last couple months have I been chewing on that. I know I would want, the mistakes that I have made, the things that I have done to hurt people that I'm responsible for. Man, I really want them to give me the benefit and be like, I tried the best I could, and now I want to get better. I know that for my own well-being and the well-being of everyone else that comes in my path, I have to choose to believe that they were not trying to harm me, but rather the opposite. One thing I've learned as I've been trying to rewrite my story with the facts that I actually have been given, those things can't change. My memories don't change. The years that I lost, truly, because of my health issues, because being over medicated, those years I can't ever get back. However, I can start to look at those things through a different lens. And actually, one thing that has completely shifted my whole point of view was a conversation with one of my very best friends. She's known me forever, has seen me through all of the struggles, and now starting to see me gain momentum in healing. She said, "Man, your life is like an apothecary." She says it's like you're sitting there at a desk, and it says open for business, and there's bottles behind you, and every bottle is labeled with some sort of suffering or trial, depression, Tourette's, shame, abuse, abandonment, betrayal, whatever, all of these things. And the bottles that are filled with like a healing balm are the ones that you actually experienced yourself. And so when you experience trauma, when you experience sadness, depression, physical problems, anxiety, trauma, all of these things, those bottles begin to fill up. And then when people come to you and say, "I'm experiencing trauma," I can say, "Oh, I have a bottle for that. I have a healing for that because I've already experienced it myself." God has something that he has created your life to look like, and he's got a purpose for you, and you've got to have tools. And part of those tools can only become yours through suffering and trial. And not that pithy, well, there's always a reason for something, or God, he'll redeem everything. Those are true. But I think for me, I really had to envision, no, I'm giving you a gift, not for you, to be able to take yourself and then give to others. And so that became kind of my story, and even still is now. So I have been a fan of Annie's for a while, her books in general, but I was late to the smartphone game. And when I got my smartphone, it was like, do you want to or have iBooks or Kindle or something like that? I'm like, sure, whatever, add the app. And you get a bunch of free like samples of books, right? So I just added them all. That's fine. And one of the samples was Annie's Let's All Be Brave. I had never heard of her, never read any of her stuff. But loved the cover. It was like this kid on the tightrope walk, thing. And so I started reading it, and really there was only like a chapter or two that was offered for free. Well, at the end of that, I was like, oh, well, I'm down. So I bought that book in real form, and then really just started reading all of her books since. And so 100 Days to Brave, that was something that I wanted to take on for myself and kind of read it and, chew on it a little bit. One of my favorite quotes from 100 Days to Brave, it says, sometimes just opening the lines of communication with God allows the Holy Spirit to lead you to the harder places. And sometimes we avoid asking God things because we fear what the answer will be. However, when it is God who answers, it isn't something to be scared of. I really love that. I feel like it resonated with me. Bravery, I feel like, is stepping into the face of fear. I feel like courage doesn't come without vulnerability. There's no such thing as courage if there's no fear, because that's just stepping. But if there's something that could harm you, or something that could go wrong, or something you're afraid of being a failure at, it demands courage. Kind of running into it, and kind of understanding that if I could do this thing that scares me the most, then maybe there's something past that I'm even more afraid of, but I would never consider had I not stepped out into fear first. When I was reading 100 Days to Brave, she says we avoid asking God things because we're afraid of what the answer will be sometimes. There's this psalm that says, our God is in heaven and he does whatever he pleases. And when I first read that a while ago, that was like, oh, great. Like, he's just sitting there like, I do what I want, right? But what are you going to say, right? I'm God. You're right. You do whatever you please. But there's another way that another version says is, our God is in heaven. He does that which pleases him. And that kind of changed things for me, because if he is good and he does what pleases him, then the thing that pleases him would be good, right? And there's other verses that talk about what pleased the Father most was laying down the life of Jesus, right? And that was done for me, and that was done for you. So really what pleases him comforts and benefits me. And it changed the way I saw even my suffering. Not to say, that my suffering pleases God. I would never say that, because I don't see that in scripture, and I don't see that in the way that he's interacted with me. But what pleases the Father is my redemption. And so if this suffering is allowed in my life, well, that would mean that he's doing something towards redemption in my life. And so back to this quote from Annie, when we avoid asking God things because we fear what the answer will be, I think understanding who he is kind of cushions the blow, where you can say whatever his answer is pleases him and comforts and benefits me.
Oh, friends, I'm so grateful for Tawni's story. And I just want to say thank you to all the therapists and counselors everywhere who are doing the good work of leading us into better places. I've done this work myself, as you know, I'm still doing it. And though it can be really hard, it continues to serve my heart as I move forward. Now, therapy doesn't, quote, fix you, but it gives you the tools and the language and the healing to help you become the healthiest version of yourself. And gosh, I am for sure better for it. Those steps to healing are big, brave steps. And if you want a little help tracking this time in your life, I've got a wonderful tool for you. I've written something I hope will be a companion for you in this journey called the 100 Days to Brave Guided Journal. So with every entry, I've pulled together my favorite thoughts on bravery and courage. And I ask you some questions that encourage you to go deeper and see where God might be working a brave thing in your life in the here and now. You can find the 100 Days to Brave Guided Journal anywhere you buy books. Hey, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about this episode and this particular story. You can tag me, Annie F. Downs. That's how you find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, everywhere you want to find me. That's how you can find me, Annie F. Downs. So use the hashtags stories from 100 Days to Brave and 100 Days to Brave. They're in the show notes, and use the actual number 100. And if you want, we'd love for you to share this story. And just to put a period on the story from Tawni, we're willing to hire a trainer at the gym to help us get more fit, and we'll seek spiritual guidance from our pastors at church. But there's no reason that we can't be as open about our mental and emotional health as we are about our spiritual and physical health. Invest in all of you, friend. If that first step is going to your first hour-long counseling appointment, be brave enough to do the work. It is so worth it. All right, friends, thanks for being here. And remember, if you haven't listened to the whole series, go back and check out the rest of the stories we've put together for this Stories from 100 Days to Brave podcast. Thanks for joining us.